Hi, everyone. Thanks for hopping on today. We're going to give everybody just a couple more minutes to join. Looks like we still have people entering the meeting here. So again, just kind of give everyone a chance to hop on. All right, I think we'll give everyone just one more minute and then we'll go ahead and get started. All right, I think we'll go ahead and get started. Again, thanks everyone for joining. Matt Johnson here with VRC. And welcome to Software Education Series. And we're going to be covering the FileBound software and really focusing today on the accounts payable team and some of the work that they do there. Before we dive into that, what I'd like to do is just jump into a few slides about our company, about our FileBound team, and just kind of introduce everyone to you in that regard. So leading our FileBound sales team is a gentleman called Jim Mountain, and I've provided his email there just in case you ever want to get a hold of Jim. And then, just members of our FileBound support team as we continue to grow the team out, kind of listed below, Aeneas, Ben, Kyle, myself, Matt Johnson, Scott, and then Stacy. If you ever need to get a hold of us, you can always email us direct, or from a support standpoint, if you see the email on the screen there, fbsupport@vitalecm.com. And what'll happen is when you email that, then between Kyle and Scott, they'll get those tickets distributed amongst the team, and we'll get you taken care of. And so really today, as far as what we're going to cover is the software education series. And as you see, we've got a list of different meetings that we'll have coming up, over the course of the summer. And really today, our focus is with existing customers and specifically customers that are using accounts payable with FileBound. We've got a great attendance today of well over 175 users, which is awesome. And we really want to show you tips and tricks of what we've learned really from each of you and how you're processing invoices today. And the future meetings that we have listed there will really follow the same suit. So we'll pick a topic, we'll dive into that, try to give you tips and tricks, and then let you know how other folks have utilized the system as well as expanded FileBound within their organization. And so our next meeting that you see on the list is going to be the FileBound AP approvers. And if you think of that type of meeting, we're going to dive into, if I'm an approver approving an invoice in FileBound, what are things that would be helpful for me to know throughout that entire process. That meeting may not be a full hour, just because their process is designed and intended to be simple, and so that's the plan. Quick question in the chat was, is this going to be recorded? And yep, we are planning on recording this meeting so you can access it later on. So a little bit about our company, VRC. So Vital Records Control is the name of our parent company, if you will. And VitalECM is the division that we work out of. And we are a premier FileBound reseller. We provide the installation, training, and support for FileBound. We've got the ability to perform document conversion services, so scanning paper to digital, if you will, document storage, and even shredding services as well. So if you need any of those types of services, definitely let us know. We can help out there. As far as FileBound is concerned, we've got well over 300 installs throughout the United States, and then quite a few up in Canada as well. We've been doing it for a long time, well over 35 years of industry experience, if you will. And that kind of led us to be, experts, if you will, in the capture, the workflow, process automation, and those types of things. A little bit about FileBound. FileBound is a division of Upland Software. They're based out of Austin, Texas. They've been around since 2001, so a long time. And what's nice about them is their support and development is based out of Lincoln, Nebraska, so we know them quite well. One of the reasons that we like FileBound and what we've stuck with FileBound over the years is the fact that it's built on technologies such as .NET technology and Microsoft SQL. That means your data is portable, and it's going to always be using the latest, greatest technology, which is important. FileBound also provides an easy to search and retrieve interface, along with a customizable workflow and forms process, which is great. And then the other piece of FileBound, which we're running into a lot more use cases lately, is the utilization of the FileBound API. And that gives us the ability to integrate with other systems, such as your accounting systems and that. And you notice the systems in bold there, those are the ones that we've initiated integrations with FileBound specifically, and those accounting systems. If your accounting system isn't listed there, just let us know. We're happy to work with you, reach out to them, and then kind of build that relationship so that we can build an integration so that we can take data that exists in FileBound and port it over into the accounting system. So there's kind of a map, of all the FileBound customers that we have under the VRC umbrella throughout the United States, and again, some in Canada. So one thing that we find is fun is that we cover all of the 4 time zones in the United States, but we also have the Atlantic time zone as well, which is the time zone just after the Eastern time zone. So kind of fun for us. So the things that people think about, and things that I want you to kind of think about today as we go through, all the tips and tricks, are really the invoice lifecycle change of, where you kind of were prior to FileBound to where you are today. Prior to FileBound, when we onboard new customers, a lot of the stories we hear is the data entry into the accounting system falls at the end of the month. And so it's a lot of rush, get things found, get things entered so that we can get them paid. With FileBound, our goal is to switch that so that as the vendors send you invoices, you're actually adding them into FileBound in the beginning of the invoice lifecycle. So that way you're not chasing it down at the end of that cycle, that sort of thing. Centralizing the capture process, which we think is important because it gives you the advantage to utilize the advanced OCR and AI as far as that is concerned with templates, et cetera. And what's important about that is for us is to know your numbers. And what I mean by that is it's important to know what vendors are templated, what should be templated. Are you getting the most bang for your buck when it comes to the OCR and AI? And if not, reach out, let us know. We can work you through that process. And the other thing that's super important to us as we build the workflows is we want to minimize the number of times that you have to touch each invoice, basically. So we like FileBound to organize your invoices. We want to analyze your invoices so we can maybe do some auto coding, auto approving. And then again, if you've got a good integration with your accounting system, to be able to integrate and push that data directly into the accounting system. And then of course, at the end of the day, as part of the AP team, you need to be able to see what invoices are not approved yet. And so today we'll make sure that you're familiar with how to find those invoices that are maybe waiting to be approved and that sort of thing. All right, so let's take a look. So I'm going to hop out of this PowerPoint and dive into FileBound real quick. So what I'll do first really is kind of log in as an AP specialist. And when I do, you're familiar with your assignments page. Really, a lot of times what people are not as familiar with is this global assignments page. So I like to make mention of that. And with the global assignments page, it really is just kind of a listing of everything that's assigned to you, no matter what step it's in, and even no matter what project it's in. So for example, I've got items assigned to me in this account for invoices, but I also have it assigned to me for the vendor onboarding process. And so it kind of just generally lists everything out. When you're going to actually begin working within FileBound, then that's when you would hit your assignments panel to look at your different subfolders below. and then you can pick one of your folders to take a look at your different invoices. On the assignments page, any one of these columns you can sort by. So for example, if I wanted to sort by vendor name, I could, and then maybe that gives me the opportunity to work multiple vendors that are the same at the same time. I can sort by due date to find out what invoices are due, now or soon, and then kind of work those invoices as well. An additional thing that you may not be familiar with is the ability to actually filter or search your assignments page. So if I wanted to look at this folder, and let's just pretend I had 100 different invoices, I could come in to the top and click on the search button, and then that would give me the ability to search within that assignments panel. So maybe I wanted to look at a specific vendor name or maybe a specific invoice date range. I could do that, and it would then filter my list out, and then I could begin working those invoices from that folder. The other thing that we can do on our assignments page is in the upper right-hand corner, you'll see there's an option for options icon. You can then click the export button. And when you click export, that gives you the ability to export that data out to a spreadsheet. So you could, in this case, click OK, and then all that data would download. If you had, 100 pages, 100 invoices, for example, you could type the number 1 for the first record, and then you'd be on page number 4 because it'll page out with 25 different items on a page. So that'll let you do your export there. If I kind of navigate down my navigation panel here on the left, and I click on my search icon, some things to mention that you may or may not know. So the fields that you see displayed here are customizable. So if you want invoice number as the first field, we can certainly do that. We can rearrange, we can hide fields that you don't use. Maybe you say, hey, we don't really search by discount number or discount total, and you'd like those fields hidden. We can do those types of things as well. When performing a search, it can be as simple as typing in the invoice number, and then that brings you back your single result, if you will. You could do multiple fields. So if I wanted to choose a date range, for example, I could choose a date range, and then I could maybe type in my vendor name to find invoices for that vendor within that date range. I can also use wildcard characters. So for example, if I wasn't sure about how they spelled the vendor name, but I knew the word Johnson was in the middle of it, then I could do %, which means anything before, and then I type in the word Johnson, and then that would give me anything inside of FileBound that has a vendor name where Johnson maybe is the first word, the third word, the last word, those types of things, and all those would get returned. And again, that wildcard character is the %, for FileBound. We can also utilize the advanced search, which as I kind of scroll down towards my blue search button here, you see I've got this gray bar called advanced search. So again, some of the fields, if I'm not really wanting to see them up here, I can move them down below, and you see now I can see things like upload date, approved by, posted by, check date, those types of things. So I can kind of hide all those, and maybe those are fields that I want to search by, but just not on a day-to-day thing. So we can customize that. The other thing that we can do is search by multiple invoice numbers. So in this example, if I typed one invoice number per line, then I would be able to enter that in. Or if you think of a concept where, maybe you get a vendor statement at the end of the month and they give you a spreadsheet full of invoice numbers, you could copy those invoice numbers and paste them right into here and then perform a search in that regard. When I do a search, similar to my assignments page, I can sort by any of the fields by just clicking on the header name, and that'll sort it ascending. If I click it again, it'll then sort it descending. So real straightforward there. But one thing that's unique to the search results, different than the assignments page, is the ability for a user to kind of rearrange the columns in maybe the order that they prefer. So for me personally, what I like is I actually like the current status column to be my first column. So I can just click on this column and drag it, and you see that I can just kind of select it and wait for that little up and down line there and let go. And then now my current status field is going to be the first column that I see. And you can even then expand it. So just like Excel, if you think of that, where you can expand the columns, we can expand different columns to see different things for different reasons. You can certainly do that. And that's on a per user basis. So, if user, A makes a change to theirs, it does not affect anybody else's. It only affects their view. And again, that's just on the search results. So it's not applied to the assignments just yet, but I can confirm that it is on their list, that something that they're going to add as well. So another thing about searching. So if we think about how do we know, what invoices do I have out there that are waiting to be approved by a manager or whomever, and I need to kind of track that, and I don't want to spend a lot of time getting a list of those invoices. So what you should be able to see on your assignments or on your search page is a field called current status. And the current status should have a drop down, and you should be able to choose some different options. So like for this example today, I've got anything that has invoice review in front of it. I know that means those are invoices that are assigned to someone for approval. And I can select all of those. I could then click on Save Search, and then I could actually save that, and maybe I'll call it Invoices Pending Approval. And the idea here is that way, the next time I perform a search for the same set of invoices, I don't have to actually choose all 11 of those boxes. It's going to save it automatically. Some of you, depending upon how long you've been in the FileBound system and been with us, instead of invoice review, it might say manager review or something of that nature. So it might be just a little bit different, but concept would be the same, where you choose the value. And now when you go to your search page, kind of like your assignments panel where it opens up, when I go to my search, I'll have a panel that opens up. And I can have a listing of as many different saved searches as I want. So that way, you can kind of pick and choose what you want. But once you click on the save search, you'll then see the results there. And now you don't have to go through that habit of going through and choosing your statuses. You just simply see, hey, I've got all these invoices that are under invoice review status, and my department location is 305, so I know it's at this department and at that location. Perfect. All right, so I'm gonna go back to our search here, grab 3 files again. And so let's dive into the viewer. So inside of FileBound, when we kind of dive into the viewer, there's a lot going on in here. Even though when you look at it, it looks pretty straightforward and pretty simple, but a lot to kind of cover. So the first place I like to talk about always is this bottom left-hand navigation panel down here. And specifically, it's the middle icon. And that's where we've got our file journal, which gives you the ability to add notes to the file. And you simply just add the note and hit add. And that's really what we want the users that are approving invoices to leave notes in. So that way it's date and time stamped, and it logs their name so that when they send you an invoice back, you specifically know what's going on with it. Similar concept where maybe you've got an invoice and you need to send it to them. Adding the information into that field is important because now it's logged, it's kept, it can't be removed or deleted, so we know it's kind of permanent, and you've got your story, and then at the end of the day, the entire story of that invoice is there just in case you ever get audited or someone has a question as to why it was paid in a certain way. Then below that, we've got our file details. For those of you that are familiar with the capture process as far as adding invoices into FileBound, this is where a lot of that data ends up after the capture process. And as you can see, we've got invoice number, date, those types of things. And as we scroll down, we expose some of the data to make it kind of easy so you can see who the last person that approved it is, what day, who posted it, if it's been paid, what the check number is, all that. A lot of times what we do from a permission standpoint is we can make these fields read only or read write on a per user group permission. So for example, when you send this invoice out for approval to a department or a manager, they'll be able to see this data, but it'll be read only, so they can't modify it. And that's important to us because you've done all of the work to get this data into the system using OCR or manual data entry or what was needed. that we don't want them to accidentally come in here and clear out a invoice number or accidentally add a character or that type of thing. So it's important for us to lock that down. Same token, if you ever felt that that needs to be opened up, we can certainly do that as well. So I've got some of you on the line that over the years we've opened up, for example, the PO number field, and the approver can then modify the PO number if that's necessary. So so again, let us know if we need any kind of changes there. And then the last icon I want to talk about down here is the very bottom one, and that's the file notes. So the file notes was the original place that FileBound created for notes. And their original intention was to create an experience like a sticky note would give you in a paper world, where you can write anything on a sticky note, put it onto a piece of paper, hand the paper off, and then now somebody can read what's on the sticky note. Just like a sticky note, anybody can take that sticky note off and throw it away, similar to file notes. So if I add a note here and hit save, that's great. But the next person can come just like a sticky note and wipe that note out as well. So it is kind of a temporary place. And then over the years, through feedback from our customers, is where they created the file journal, which now is a more permanent way of leaving notes, date and time stamping it, so you can track and log those things better. All right, so then let's dive into below the invoice itself, and it's our geocoding panel first. So inside of our geocoding panel, you can see that we've got the ability to view what GL accounts we have applied to the invoice. And originally, that's exactly what this panel was designed for, was simply just going to be a view into that data. And the first iteration of FileBound using accounts payable back in the day, some years ago, was this advanced icon over here. And it gives you this little pop-up window. And the pop-up window was nice because it gave you kind of a place to move this to another monitor if you wanted to look at your invoice. First off, but then second off, it would do a lookup. So as I type in my GL account number and I hit tab, then you can see it would fill in the description for me automatically. So I get just kind of that warm and fuzzy feeling that I've entered the correct GL account. Then I can, of course, tab through and fill out the rest of my fields, whatever it needed to be, and then simply add that to my table down below. And then as my table fills up and my variance becomes 0, click save, and then that would then save that information to the database. So that was that was good and worked well. That they then began to expand upon that. So one of the next things that they added was the ability to click on this 3-dotted icon. And then now we can actually search for GL accounts in case we don't know them. So maybe we know, well, it starts off with a 2, but we don't know which one. So I hit search, and now I can see all the GL accounts that I need, and I can select the one I want and click OK. So that was a good option. Then they added the ability to search the description. So same idea, I could use a wildcard character, and I could type in the word accrual. And maybe I'm not sure exactly my GL account, but I know it's going to have the word accrual in my description, so I can search and then view those values there. So then, again, once I select that, it would bring it up into my item entry window. When I hit add, it adds it to my table, and then I hit save, it commits it to the database. So that worked well. People like that, and then of course, good feedback from our customer base brought them to include drop-down menus, and not only drop-down menus, but drop-down menus that cascade off of each other. So some of you, with the way your GL accounts are created in FileBound, is you've got a location, a department, an account number, and a sub-account number. And some of you have it set up in a way that when you select a location, then the department drop-down filters based off of that value, and you choose your department, and the GL accounts filter based off of that value. And when you choose your GL account, then the sub-account filter off of that value. And definitely the advanced window is a nice way to do that, because it's got a lot of space for the drop-downs first off, but then it also includes that ability to search the drop-down as well. So you can use that same kind of wildcard character search to find the GL account that you're after. So they definitely evolved over the years, and it's been great getting feedback from our customers, other resellers like ourselves, throughout the United States, and really across the world. So it's been fun to watch them grow in that regard. So just like the advanced panel kind of evolved over time, so is this the view only panel down below. So as we kind of got working with clients, more and more customers would say, well, I really don't want the managers geocoding it because they're not going to know what to put in, or they're going to do it wrong, and I'm going to spend more time fixing it than I am accepting it. And I already know what my GL numbers are. I don't need to click this advanced window. It's just extra clicks for me to do. So then FileBound then added the add button, so that now, of course, you can click in here, type your number, hit tab. If I want to tab through, it'll create a new line, and away we go from there. As they kind of keep expanding on it, like right now, we can do drop downs, we can do cascading. We don't have a ton of real estate down below to work with, if you think of the space from that a drop down would take. But I know they are looking into the ability to type in a GL account number, and when you hit tab, fill in the description automatically, so you can feel comfortable that you selected the right one. So I know that that's going to come. I don't have a date for you to tell you on that, but. So that's kind of the geocoding tab. Let me kind of keep going to the rest of the tabs and tell you about that. So really the other tabs that you see down here at the bottom, so receiving documents, purchase order documents, as well as the vendor information. What we find with that is those are really ways to relate common information, if you will, that would be handy for you as the AP team to see without having to go out to another system to take a look. And so, for example, on my receiving document tab, so that might be a document that's synced over from your accounting system. It might be a document that you physically scan and add into FileBound, that sort of thing. So that's all possible. And then when you're looking at this, you can take a look at it, which is great. When we're looking at the related documents in this example, then we would use the PO number to kind of drive that connection between the invoice and that related document. So if it's got the same PO number, then it would display here in that list. Similar concept, if I go to the purchase order, maybe receiving documents isn't a document that you need, that's okay. Maybe you're more of a company that needs just a purchase order. So we can do the same thing with purchase orders. It is a dynamic list. And if you look at this, right now we don't have a purchase order number or purchase order document here. But if I did modify this, maybe for some reason that PO number was entered incorrectly, I make that correction, I hit save, and then you can see that FileBound will do that lookup dynamically and then display the PO document that is associated to this invoice based off of that PO number. And same idea, if I deleted that back out and changed it back to the original PO number, then that document goes away. So again, the idea is giving you those documents at your fingertips so that if you needed to look at them, you sure could. Now, some of our customers, they do have vendors where they'll send them one invoice document, but on the invoice itself, there are multiple PO numbers listed. And so this ability to be able to change the PO number and then look at, for example, the receiving document or look at the purchase order document for that particular PO number is super helpful, which is why we like the fact that those panels are dynamic. The vendor information tab is kind of a newer one. Not very many of you have this set up, but I wanted to show it to you because I've got some newer customers that have been asking about it. And basically what we're doing is we're taking the vendor number and associating it to the vendor list that we already have inside of FileBound and then displaying that information here. And the idea is that maybe you're looking at this vendor and you're like, well, for this vendor, we've got 3 different vendor numbers. So I want to make sure I've got the right vendor number. And maybe this list is helpful for you to say, oh, looks like I've got the wrong remit address. So I need to change my vendor number to a different number. And then that way it will make sure to post correctly into my accounting system. So just a way to kind of think about that sort of thing. Another way to think about it would be as we progress today, I'll show you a process where we can collect the W-9s from your vendors using a vendor form. And as you start collecting those types of documents, now not only could you look at vendor data down below, but we could actually then open up the file and look at those types of documents if you need to look at a W-9 or proof of insurance, or maybe it's maybe it's a letter from the bank, to authorize the ACH transactions, those types of things. We can store all those documents in FileBound, and then again associate it to the invoice so that it's just visible for you to access all in one window. Okay, so let's talk about automation within the viewer. So, if we think about our data on the left-hand side, our file details. So our goal in the capture process, as we put the invoice into FileBound, is to extract data off of the document using OCR technology to do that, such as invoice number, date, etc. Once the document and data gets into FileBound, then what we want to make sure that we can do is look at what other data can we automate. And so, for example, the invoice due date is a simple one. So as the vendor comes into FileBound or invoice comes into FileBound, we could look at the vendor number, we could look at the vendor information and see what the terms are, and then have FileBound automatically populate that due date so that you don't have to worry about filling that field in during the capture process. Or if during capture you felt that you specifically wanted to define the due date, you sure could. And as it comes into FileBound, we would honor whatever value you selected in capture and then ignore auto-filling that in. So again, trying to save some data entry and think about how we're doing that. Another good example is we've got certainly quite a few clients that we can analyze the structure of the PO number, and that can tell us what department or what location or what manager, if you will, needs to approve an invoice, based off of information and how the PO is laid out. So just a simple example, if the PO number starts off with an 8, maybe that means it's going to be for location number 8, and it's going to go to a specific department, such as the parts department, for example. So we could translate that and then auto fill in that routing field, if you will, here. So then as the invoices get routed, we don't have to have someone manually enter that in during the capture process. The other thing that we've done for some companies is, if you think about utilities vendors, a lot of times they'll have an account number on that invoice. So we can utilize that account number from an OCR standpoint to maybe look up the vendor name, vendor number, look up the terms, any kind of other information we might want to look up, so we can make that a field and do some decisions based off of that, which is nice. And then if we think about our automation when it comes to GL coding, there's a lot of different ways we can auto-populate data in here. And so what we'd like to work with you on is determine, all right, what fields do we need populated, per invoice? And if I said just in this example that I needed, every invoice is going to always have these 3 columns populated, then what we would do is we'd say, okay, maybe we can make a rule based off of this vendor number to automatically populate this GL account. And maybe you say, no, I don't think that's going to work, and no big deal. So then maybe we can use the PO number as a trigger to auto code, or maybe we can use the department location as a trigger to auto code. So kind of work with you to identify, hey, if it's a invoice and it's from this vendor and it's going to this department, then we can apply these specific GL accounts there. Same idea, on the left-hand side, if there's shipping or freight charges, we can automatically then fill in that GL coding, and again, use that routing rules to fill in as many of the fields as we can for you. Now, some of you, of course, that are using the receiving documents and the purchase order documents, for example, we would have then the ability to look at that data as well and compare it to the invoice. So if I think about how this is laid out, FileBound is simply going to compare data from the invoice, the data from, in this example, the receiving document. And so the first data we want to use is the PO number. Okay, so PO number matches, yes. Then in this case, we'd say, all right, the total received on this document is $908.58. Then we can build rules in FileBound to create an invoice subtotal. So maybe that's invoice minus freight. Maybe it's invoice minus freight minus tax. We let you decide what that math is, but then we populate this field down below, and now we can compare the subtotal. And if those match, then FileBound can feel pretty comfortable saying, okay, the receiving document matches the invoice. So why don't we auto fill in the invoice number so that that's populated? And now the next time, or even 6 months from now, when we open up this invoice, we can look and know that this receiving document is the one that we used for this particular invoice because we've got the invoice number in there. Then in addition to that, we could say, okay, well, if everything matches, then let's go to the GL panel and have FileBound automatically fill in our GL coding for us. And now we've really successfully performed a true two-way match between the invoice and the data from the receiving documents by using the subtotal of the invoice in this case and the total of the receiving document. And for some of you that are doing that today, you're also taking advantage of the fact that, hey, if those two documents, the dollar amounts happen to match each other, then we're going to call that approved. So we don't have to send the invoice out to be approved. We can just put it right into the approved folder, if you will, or a new folder indicating that those two things matched. Again, trying to organize those documents for you in that regard. Then some of you, have taken a step further and they'll say, okay, well, if it matches the receiving document, then let's see if we can find a matching purchase order as well. And then that would become your true three-way match where you're comparing the invoice to the receiving document to the purchase order. And then we can place those in a specific folder in FileBound to let you know, hey, these are invoices that have a three-way match. These are invoices that have a two-way match, and so on and so forth. But again, our goal and what we want to do is, again, minimize data entry. So if we can minimize data entry by automatically geocoding things, definitely let us know in that regard. Perfect. Okay, so the next thing I want to kind of cover inside of the viewer is the settings icon. So in the bottom right-hand corner, you'll see a settings icon. It kind of looks like a little sprocket or gear. When I click on that settings icon, then it opens up a panel. And towards the top, you'll see that we've got a couple checkmark boxes that I would like to mention. So the first two are to auto expand this tree view on the left-hand side. So I think that's handy. And then I always check mark this fourth one, which is show first document when opening. So just means when you open the viewer, it's going to display the document right away. For those of you that might email invoices out of FileBound, you may want to convert those documents to a PDF if they're not a PDF already. So you could prompt to convert those to a PDF. But then really the one I want to talk about mostly today was kind of a newer setting that you find down in the workflow section down below. And that's going to be this middle check mark box. So it's automatically load the next assignment from the file tree. And the idea is if I have multiple invoices loaded in my file tree and I click an icon, maybe CSV export or send for approval, whatever my workflow button would be, that once that routing is complete, then the viewer would then jump to the next item in the list. So it's kind of a newer feature. I would say turn it on, see how it goes. Definitely give us some feedback. More feedback we give to FileBound on that is always better. And that. So definitely, again, if I was to recommend settings, I would definitely do the top two checkboxes for sure. And then at minimum, I would do that second one at the very bottom. And really just the bottom two boxes would be great. And I think that'll make your life a little bit better. And then really the last thing to mention in the viewer is really just the assignment buttons that you see over here. All these are customizable, the words on them, the actions that they take. The power of FileBound is within the workflow and the ability to modify those, add rules to them, etc. So I'm not going to dive too deep into the workflow design today, but we will have a session in the future that will really dive into those buttons, how they work on the back end. And for those of you interested, it'd be a great one to kind of just show you the back end workings of all that. All right, so I'm going to close out of the viewer real quick, and I want to jump into just a few more topics before I show you, how other folks are using FileBound, if you will. And so the first thing is inside of FileBound, when I go to my search page, I can choose my AP GL accounts as a dropdown, for example. And that's a list of all the GL accounts we have in FileBound. And some of you may have rules created already that says, hey, before we export this data out, we want to have FileBound verify that this GL account number, if it requires a stock number, meaning that it says yes here, that we make sure that it does so in the GL coding. So we can kind of build those rules there. But I wanted to show you that list so that you knew how to modify values. And again, that was just as simple as going to our search and then choosing GL accounts. I can do the same thing with master vendor list. So I can search and I can see my vendors. We talked about terms, vendor terms. So for example, like this one's set to 15. So if an invoice comes into FileBound and the invoice due date is blank, then we simply add 15 days to that invoice number, invoice date, and then that becomes our due date. So real easy to manage those types of items. And then the last one to kind of show is our AP vendors default GL accounts. And so this is the idea where if you want to auto code an invoice based off of the vendor number, then you would add that vendor into this list, if you will. So for UPS, you can see, if UPS comes in with this vendor number, this is how we code it, and we take the invoice total times 1, and then that's the dollar amount that we put in our GL coding. As you can see, if we've got one like the eDisk where we have multiple GL accounts, or we want to break it out amongst multiple cost centers, you can do that, and then put your numeric value here, so 0.33, and it'll just take the invoice total times that number, and then autofill in those amounts. And of course, you can always modify that, but again, the idea is if we can automate some of that GL coding for you on your invoices, we definitely want to do that. So on that same idea, let's say you wanted to add an entry into this list. Instead of our search icon, you would just go one below to our add content button. And then you simply just choose AP vendors default GL accounts, and you can add that information and simply just hit save. And then again, if you've got multiples, just save multiple rows with different values. And then, FileBound will analyze that list. And that same add concept works exactly the same for, vendors. That works the same for GL accounts, those types of things. All right, so got a couple more minutes that I want to spend inside of FileBound. And what I'd like to do is I'm going to actually log out. And I'm going to log in as a system administrator. And I want to just show you a couple of quick things about users inside of FileBound. So when I'm a user inside of FileBound, your admin can then create the user account. When they do, they're going to set up like an initial password for them to change, if you will. They're going to come to the security tab. They're going to add them to different groups. So like if I add this user into this group for 305 parts manager, that now means that person, can approve invoices if they're assigned to that group. And what I mean by that is if I go to the groups here, you'll see that now if I look at this pencil for this group, this is what they can do when they're inside of FileBound as far as from a permission standpoint. These are the people that are in the group. So I could have one or multiple people in that group. And then from a workflow routing standpoint, when FileBound is sending out the invoices for approval, it's going to reference this project called Workflow Routing AP Invoices. And when it does, for example, we're going to look for that 305, and you'll see it in our department location. And then when we assign to the AP team, we'll know what group to assign it to. When we send it out for approval, we'll know what user group to send it out to as well. And then some of you have added in, multiple layers of approvals. So, maybe you say, okay, 305 parts manager, when they hit approve, if it's over $5,000, it then needs to go to a corporate parts manager. So the nice thing with that is you can see that that's kind of defined based off our department location. So for example, the IT doesn't have a second layer of approval, CEO doesn't, so on and so forth. So again, we can work to modify any of that if needed, and go from there. All right, so what I'm going to do is I'm going to exit out of FileBound real quick and hop back into our PowerPoint. And I want to talk a little bit about how other folks, customers that are on this meeting, are utilizing FileBound in different ways beyond accounts payable. One of the things that we find is once people start using accounts payable, you really have all of the major approval people within the organization utilizing it because they're approving the invoices. And so they're the same people that might approve, things for HR or things for contracts or sales, those types of things. So now that they're accustomed to logging into FileBound to approve things, people like to expand upon what they can, use that routing logic for. And so from an accounts payable thing, vendor onboarding has been a pretty popular one. So I'll show you that today. A couple people are talking about adding an invoice submission portal. I want you to think about it, not for every vendor, not for every invoice, but maybe for some of the invoices that it makes sense. So I'll explain that in a little bit. And then I do have a handful of people that are working on the vendor statements, where we take the statements, we run them through a special OCR engine to extract all of the data off of that statement. And now it gives us basically a listing of all of the invoices, the amounts, and the dates. And we can upload that data into FileBound and then run some reports to match the invoices that are in FileBound. So if you can imagine, I've got a statement that has 45 invoices on it. I run it through an OCR engine. I push it into FileBound, and FileBound then identifies, hey, we've got 39 of those 45 in FileBound. All of them are marked as posted. All the dollar amounts match up, so we're good to go. But here's the 6 or 7 that you need to do some research on. So that's the idea with the vendor statements that we're kind of working through some folks on. So if you're interested in that, let us know for sure. Then really the other one I want to mention on this screen is expense reports. So years ago, people would come to us and say, hey, can we do FileBound or expense reports within FileBound? And we would say, yeah, we can do that, but it's not great. We don't know it's going to save you very much time, but we can use it to help organize it. And over the years, it became pretty apparent with talking with you that we needed an integration with another system, and some people were using Concur, they're looking for something else. And so what we ended up finding was a company that creates a product called Expense Point. And just like any other expense reporting application out there, it's mobile based. Take pictures of your invoices or your receipts, and collect them together, auto geocode it, get the approvals, so on and so forth. But then the benefit is once that approval is done, then it will push that report into FileBound. And once it gets into FileBound, we can have it go into a workflow. And in some cases, for those that are automatically posting invoices into their accounting system, FileBound could really just be the resting place and a pass through into the accounting system. So pretty exciting stuff there. If you're interested, you can reach out to us. We can get you in touch with Miranda. Miranda is the best one to work with. If you let her know that you came to her from us, I think that's important, because then when she does her presentation, she can talk to you about how it integrates with FileBound and even give you a demonstration on how that works. So we set her up with the ability to do that. So. Okay, so just a few things I wanted to pop up onto the screen and mention in the meeting while I have you is, the first one would be capture automation. So we definitely have seen advancements in the capture automation recently, especially when it comes to the quality of the OCR and the AI piece of it. And really the idea being that we can fully automate things. So one of our clients is a Komatsu dealership, and they have to download their invoices from Komatsu. They drop them into a folder, and then what they've done with their capture is we've worked together to build a process where capture sweeps the folder automatically. It grabs the data off of the invoices, imports the invoices into FileBound. We then analyze the data that capture gave to us inside of FileBound, and a lot of those invoices are clean, so we just pass them right on through, so they either go out for approval or whatever the next step is in the workflow. But in their case, they had 53,000 invoices that they processed in 2023. Of those, 30,000 of those were the Komatsu invoices. So if you think about the amount of invoices they're utilizing capture for, they basically didn't have to touch 30,000 invoices in capture because we were able to automate that. Not everybody's as lucky, when it comes to that percentages. So the second example is one that we worked with where they said, hey, let's see if we can automate our top 10 vendors. It ended up being that we could automate all but 3 of them, meaning that the 3 that we couldn't automate were all filled in except for 1 or 2 fields that we just needed them to visually verify, basically just based off of the design of the invoice. But in their case, out of the 27,000 invoices that they processed throughout their calendar year, 6,000 of them got fully automated. So now, instead of utilizing capture for almost 28,000 invoices, they're looking at only having to worry about it, utilizing it for 21,000. So that's a big time savings in that regard. So let us know. We can work with you to kind of work with you to find out what your numbers are and see what automations we can get you going with inside of PSI or the FileBound capture things. Then in addition to that, we've seen a lot of growth from FileBound on the API side of things, meaning that other systems are now getting to a place where we can connect and push data from FileBound into their system, or they can push data from their system into FileBound. So a good example, I've got a Vermeer dealer that did a really great job of building an interface on their end, or script, maybe is a simpler way to say it, on their end to connect to the Vermeer manufacturer, download all the invoices, and then from there directly push them into FileBound. So they're skipping capture completely and saved them time, saved them money, because they were able to get rid of one of the licenses that they had for capture, because they could fully automate those invoices, again, not having anybody touch them, which is awesome. We've had customers integrate CRMs with FileBound, where you might have a salesperson in the CRM. They're interested in looking at invoices that have a certain stock number associated to them. So we teach the people that run the CRM how to connect to FileBound, how to do a search for those invoices. And now the sales team doesn't have to be trained how to use FileBound. They just have to be trained how to click the new button in the CRM to view those invoices. And then other people that we work with, kind of have a reporting team, if you will, and they like to connect to FileBound using FileBound's API and just use a product like Power BI, if you will, to connect and do reporting on the data inside of FileBound. So just some things to think about and talk about, if you will. FileBound does have a product called FileBound Connect, which does give you the ability to connect Excel to FileBound. The concept, if you think about it, would be I can connect my Excel to FileBound. In Excel, I could do a search, which would give me FileBound data. And then from there, if you're good in Excel, you could create a pivot table and that sort of thing. So the nice thing with FileBound Connect is it's free as far as the software goes. And then on our end, it's just a few hours to kind of get connected to you and get it installed and configured, and you can kind of play with that. So we don't have a ton of people using Connect because it's kind of ever evolving, but I've been using it internally here for about a year, and we feel pretty comfortable that it's at a good spot where if you wanted to dive into that world, we can help you do that. And so forms have been incredibly popular. So again, if I go back to my earlier statement, where if I've got an invoice and I route it to all the different managers in my company, a lot of times they're also doing other types of workflows, other types of approvals, and maybe it's not as organized as it could be. So maybe there's a check request process, or maybe there's a process to have special allowances where, hey, we're going to give people discounts, but we need certain levels of approval to do that. Maybe we need to request to hire somebody. Maybe our HRS system is great. It does all the great HR things that we need to do, but in order to hire somebody, we've got to go through this process to get approval to do it. So we've got people that are utilizing FileBound to do it. Vendor onboarding is a really fun one. I'll show you that here in a minute. Capital acquisition forms as well, that sort of thing. So this is just a small list of the forms that we've built. When we came up with the list, we probably had over 100 different types of forms. And I felt our most fun one was we worked with a hospital one time, and every time you scheduled an appointment in a particular conference room, you would then go to this form, fill it out, which then submitted into FileBound and went to the kitchen so you could make sure you had snacks and cookies and coffee and all that in the conference room. So that was a fun one. All right, so some forms just to give you visuals behind it. So vendor invoice submission. So when you think about the invoices that you're putting into FileBound, the obvious ones are the ones that we can automate. So the big vendors, the consistent vendors, those types of things, and that's great. But sometimes you find that you spend a whole bunch of time on handwritten invoices or invoices that are in bad formats or whatever. And so the concept that we're kind of working with some of our customers on is, hey, if I've got a cleaning crew that comes in and they always give me a handwritten invoice, and I always scan it into my OCR software, and it, it's always going to, not read correctly, and I'm always going to have to manually touch it, and yada yada yada. Why not give the ability to have a simple form like this on their phone, where we ask the cleaning crew, hey, enter in this number, enter in your invoice number, the amount, and then location, take a picture of your invoice, and then hit submit. And then as that goes into FileBound, instead of maybe going down the traditional workflow, maybe we send that to somebody in FileBound, they fill in the blanks, and then from there, move it on the traditional workflow. So again, we're trying to say, okay, if we don't put these bad quality invoices into capture, that's going to help us out in capture, because we're not going to have to stop all the time and deal with them. And if we put some of the onus on the vendor, because they're the ones giving us the bad document in the first place, this might be a solution, again, for invoice portal, but specifically just for certain vendors. So just something to think about there. Vendor onboarding is, again, becoming more and more popular with our customers, where the idea is that it's time to onboard a vendor. We need to get the W-9, their billing information, payment information, whatever you have, if you will, into your accounting system. And some people already have a PDF document, or they've got an email that they have in place, et cetera. But the idea is, send them a URL, if you will, that as part of an email. And when the vendor gets that link, they click on it, up pops your FileBound form. They fill out the information. They don't have to log into FileBound, because it will sit on a FileBound portal. FileBound has a module for forms and for portals, so that they can connect, fill out the form, fill out whatever information you want, such as ACH. They can attach documents, etc. And then when you submit that, we can have that submit to whomever inside of your accounting system. So maybe it needs to go to the accounting team, and then they process it from there. So some people actually have a process in front of this where it's a new vendor request. So there's internal approvals that happen. Once that's complete, then the new vendor onboarding takes over, and all that. So just some fun things that people do within FileBound. Miscellaneous purchase orders, similar concept, just another way to use a purchase order, but maybe not in your accounting system. Maybe this is a simpler way to handle it. Plus, then it's already filed in FileBound, so when the invoice comes in, we can connect it to the invoice. Capital asset requests, so maybe I need to buy a car for location A, and I've got to get the right approvals in order to do that. So we can build a form to collect whatever data you need, and then route it to get whatever approvals you need, so that the purchasing department or whomever has the authority to then go buy that vehicle. So, alrighty, well, that is about everything I needed to cover. So I appreciate that. Thank you for everyone for joining. I see we have a bunch of questions in the chat, so let me see if I can do that real quick. Okay, so yep, meeting's definitely being recorded. Yes, so asked and answered. So in the file journal, which is where you leave the comment, and it has the date and timestamp that you left the comment, the question is there a notification icon, like a little exclamation point or something? And there currently is not. I will tell you that we, as well as all of the other resellers, have put that on FileBound to get that accomplished in our last, if you will, partner meeting. And so it's on their list. They're looking into it. Their initial challenge with it was there's so much data that's in that journal besides just notes. They just didn't want that to be exclamation point all the time. So they're trying to identify what we can do specifically for that. So, yep. And then also download. Yep. So that was another one, is the ability to maybe download those notes. So I know that's on their list as well. And yes, the notification for only for comments, that's exactly what they are looking into as well. So file notes to load quicker. I'd have to see. I guess I haven't had anyone show me that the notes don't load fast enough. So reach out to me on that, send an email, and then we'll connect and take a look at it. The FileBound version I am on right now is 8.3. Yeah, 8.3. So I'm on the newest version. So, yep. All right, well, that hits the top of our hour. So I appreciate everyone. Again, I hope this meeting was helpful. We'll have a lot of different topics covering a lot of different meetings covering a lot of different topics, and we'll dive deeper into certain things. So don't feel you have to attend all of them, but if you want to, you're more than welcome to, or if you've got other folks in your organization that you think should attend those, definitely let them know. I'll also let you know that the intention is to do these meetings at a pretty frequent cadence here in the beginning. And then once we're done through all the meetings, we'll start cycling through and doing them again, right? So as the FileBound advances, as you guys teach us more ways that you're using the system, then we'll get those meetings out so we can teach you more things. So again, appreciate your time. If you need anything, just reach out to us and let us know.